Hi everyone! In this video we're going to have a look at the different patterns of intonation. Remember, intonation is a combination of the change of pitch of our voice, stress and rhythm, all put together to produce meaning. If you're new to intonation, you could also first of all watch my introduction video on intonation. Now, let's have a look at the three main patterns of intonation. First of all, we have a falling intonation. I'm going to give you an example by humming a falling intonation. Hopefully, you are able to hear the fall at the end of this utterance. Then we could have a rising intonation. Hopefully you were able to hear that too. And number three, we could also have a combination of a full rising intonation. Again, I'm going to give you an example. A falling rising intonation. I'm going to give you more examples in a moment. Now, the question of course is, what does each pattern sound like in sentences? And also, what pattern do we use and when? And that's what we're going to find out in this video. Now remember, I'm Billie English, and you can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at @TheBillieEnglish. I'm posting short videos Tuesdays and Saturdays on vocabulary, phrasal verbs, and pronunciation. But you can also follow me on YouTube and Facebook, where I'll always post new videos Wednesdays at 4 as a premiere, so you can meet me in the live chat. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Now, let's have a look at the different patterns. Now, what is the pattern in statements? First of all, here is an example. I love going to the beach. This is a statement. I'm stating a fact. Now let's listen again and pay attention to the intonation at the end of the sentence. I love going to the beach. I love going to the beach. Is it a falling or rising intonation? We live in London. We live in London. She works with me. She works with me. Hopefully you were able to hear that all of those statements have a falling intonation at the end. I'm going to read them out again. I love going to the beach. We live in London. She works with me. There's a clear falling intonation. Now, this is not the case in all other languages. Some other languages might have a rising intonation, and it is quite common for students to adopt a rising intonation in statements. It can sound a little bit strange when you do that in English. So make sure not a rising intonation, a falling intonation in statements. That would sound the most natural. Now, what is the pattern of intonation in open questions? Let's first of all clear up what open questions really are. We sometimes also call them WH questions. And that is really because they start with a question word, and most of them start with WH. What, where, why, but also how. Here the WH is in different places. That's also a question word. And then we have many more. Now, those are open questions because the answer is always information. And what I mean by that is, if I ask you, where do you live? You will give me a place. I live over there. I live in Madrid. I live in the suburbs. So the answer is information. It is not just yes or no. And that is why we call them open questions. So here's an example of an open question. And again, I'm going to read it out in a moment, and I want you to listen carefully and tell me what the intonation pattern is. If you're watching this live, you can put that in the chat. Is it a rise or a fall? Where are you from? Where are you from? What do you do? What do you do? How long is it? How long is it? Hopefully you were able to hear the pattern of intonation in those open questions. It is a falling intonation at the end of the question. Where are you from? What do you do? How long is it? Etc. There could be many more examples. Those are quite common when we speak. We often ask open questions, and they follow a falling intonation pattern in English. Now, I've got a little tip for you here. If you found this difficult to hear and you would like to hear some more examples, you could just simply watch a quiz show like University Challenge, Mastermind. There are many quiz shows. In most quiz shows, the candidates are asked open questions and they need to give information as an answer. And the showmasters are doing quite a good job showing falling intonation in those open questions. So watch a quiz show if you would like to see some more examples. Now let's have a look at another type of question in English, and those are closed questions. So in comparison here, they look a little bit different grammatically. We also call them yes/no questions, and that is because the answer is first of all just yes or no. Here is an example. Is Tim here? And the answer is simply yes or no. So grammatically they're different because they start either with an auxiliary verb or with a modal verb, not with a question word. So let's have a look at some examples, and I will read them out. And again, I want you to listen to the intonation and see if you can find the pattern. So I'm going to start with the first one again. Is Tim here? Is Tim here? Are you happy? Are you happy? Does it work? Does it work? What is the pattern? Can he come? Can he come? All of those have a rising intonation. Now this is a bit funny really, because we have different types of questions in English and they don't all follow the same pattern. Open questions have a falling intonation, but closed questions, these yes/no questions, they have a rising intonation. So, is Tim here? I want you to answer. Tell me yes or no. Are you happy? Does it work? Can he come? Rising intonation pattern. Now, we also have another type of question in English, and those we call tag questions. And I'm sure you've seen them before. They usually have a little ending after a comma, and they add what we call a question tag. For example, isn't it? Didn't they? Do I? Or Americans tend to use a universal tag, right? Now, these are called question tags, and we can add them to statements to form tag questions. Now, how to form them grammatically is a bit complicated. I do have a video on that as well if you're interested, but we just want to have a look now at the intonation pattern. So for that, we need an example sentence. So here's our example sentence. You can see it. I told you, didn't I? But we also need to have context. In what context could somebody say this sentence? Now, my context is a chat between a mother and her daughter. The the mother is talking to her daughter. The daughter had an exam, she didn't study, and she got a bad grade. And the mother is now telling the daughter, well, I told you to study, didn't I? Obviously, mother and daughter had a conversation long before this exam took place. And the mother told her to study, she didn't, and she got a bad grade. And now the mom is saying, I told you to study, didn't I? What is the intonational pattern here in the question tag? I told you to study, didn't I? There is a falling intonation. Now, what does that really mean? What is the message the mother is also trying to send to her daughter here? She's trying to tell her that this is not a real question. I do not want an answer necessarily from you. I'm making a statement because you know I told you and I know I told you. And I show you that I'm sure of that by using a falling intonation. So that pattern is quite common if you're stating a fact and you kind of want to say, you know this and I know this. This is common knowledge. And I'm just bringing it up again here to state it. I told you, didn't I? So with a falling intonation, those tag questions are not real questions. We don't really want an answer as such. We know the answer to this question. And we show that by using a falling intonation. However, there could be another pattern. Let's have a look at that next. Now, again, we're going to use exactly the same sentence. However, the context is new. Now we're imagining a meeting at work. And there are a couple of colleagues, they're chatting together and the boss comes in and he tells them that they need to have their reports ready by 3 o'clock today. But this is a bit of a surprise to the team. They thought they had longer. It turns out the boss had forgotten to tell them that the deadline was today. So now he's a bit unsure. He doesn't know. I thought I told them. Or maybe I didn't. He's questioning himself. And he says, I told you, didn't I? I told you, didn't I? Now, what is the intonational pattern here? Here we have a rising intonation on the question tag. And this is really because the speaker wants to tell you that they're not quite sure, they're unsure, and they want to have confirmation back from you. I told you, didn't I? Some of the team might say, no, you never told us. Maybe somebody says, oh yeah, no, I remember. It's a long time ago you told us and we forgot. So a rising intonation in a question tag means I'm not quite sure. And so this is really a little bit more of a real question now. I want you to answer. I want some confirmation from you. I want you to tell me what you think, what the answer is. And so there could be two different patterns here. A falling intonation if I'm certain, but a rising intonation if I'm not sure and I want confirmation. Now, let's have a look at a last intonation pattern, and that is for lists. Here is an example. Let's imagine we are organizing a party, and we're discussing what we need to buy before the party starts. Here's our sentence. Now, I want you to listen already carefully to the intonation. We need a cake, biscuits, snacks, and drinks. I'll say it one more time. We need a cake, biscuits, snacks, and a drink. What is happening here? We have a rising intonation on all of the items apart from the last. We need a cake, biscuits, snacks. And now we list our last item, and we signal this is the last item with a falling intonation. And drinks. Now you might think, isn't it clear that this is the last item because you use and before the last item? Often it is, but it would still sound like you haven't finished if you use a rising intonation. Let's listen. We need a cake, biscuits, snacks, and drinks. The listener would probably think, and what else? It sounds like you have not finished your list. Equally, if I left out the word and still use the correct intonational pattern, you would know that my list has finished. Listen. We need a cake, biscuits, snacks, drinks. Again, it sounds like, okay, she's done. This is the end of the list. The last item has a falling intonation. So the pattern here is really, you have rise, rise, rise on however many items you list, and the last one is a fall. And that falling intonation signals you're done. The list has finished. Now let's summarize those different intonational patterns. First of all, we had statements. They usually have a falling intonation. Then we looked at open questions with WH question words. They usually also have a falling intonation. However, closed questions, yes/no questions, have a rising intonation. We also looked at tag questions, and here we could have a rise or a fall depending on the meaning that you want to send. And last but not least, for lists, you have rise, rise, rise for all of the items you list until the very last one where you have a fall. Now, some of you might ask, are we always following these patterns, these intonation patterns? Most of the time, yes. However, there are, of course, exceptions, and sometimes people use different patterns. It's a language. Yes, there are rules, but not everybody keeps them. And there are also some regional differences. There's something called Australian questioning intonation. We're going to talk about that in a separate video. But the patterns I explained in this video are the most common patterns, and you will hear native English speakers use those. So next time, when you're listening to someone, just really pay attention to their intonation pattern. I hope this has been helpful, and if you have any questions, put them in the comment section below.